Hi, Brent Freeman with the CBB Group. In today's video, we're going to address working capital. What is it? Where do you find it? How do you measure it? And most importantly, why you as a seller or buyer should care. Now, I'm heading up to Seattle for a meeting, and I thought it might be a good analogy to talk about this airplane representing your business and the gas in the wings representing the working capital that runs it. So if you don't have enough, you won't reach your destination, and you might be looking for a soft place to land the airplane and your business. So a little more on working capital. Stick around.
Working capital. Where do you find it and how do you measure it? Well, working capital is located on a company's balance sheet, and it is simply the difference between the company's current assets and its current liabilities. It is most commonly known as the company's efficiency ratio, and it can tell you the company's short-term health, i.e., can it meet its short-term obligations with its current cash and inventory that it has on hand. Easier way to calculate working capital is looking at a working capital ratio. Now, this indicates whether a company has enough short-term assets to cover its short-term debt. A ratio below 1 indicates that the company does not have enough capital to meet its short-term obligations. A ratio of between 1.5 and 2 is considered sufficient to cover the working capital requirements of a company ongoing. Let's take a look at the definition in a little further detail with regards to how you'd calculate working capital on a balance sheet. So taking a look at a company's balance sheet, you would take the total of the company's cash on hand, its accounts receivable, inventory, and if it has a WIP, you would take the cost in excess of billings from its current liabilities, which would include the company's trade payables, credit cards tied to inventory, a line of credit tied to inventory, the other side of the WIP, which would be your billings in excess of cost, and customer deposits. Simply taking those two totals, your current assets minus your current liabilities, will give you the company's actual working capital. Let's take a look at a balance sheet as an example to calculate working capital. Now, on this slide, we have revenue of about $900,000 a month. The assets are cash of $1,408,000, accounts receivable $1 million, inventory $800,000, WIP $120,000, for total current assets of $3,328,000. From that, you'll take your liabilities of accounts payable of $1 million, credit line $250,000, WIP $75,000, and customer deposits of $50,000, or $1,375,000. The working capital for this company is $1,953,000, or a working capital ratio of 4.2 to 1, which simply states that for every dollar of liabilities, the company has $2.42 worth of current assets. So you can see this company has got probably excess working capital, and we'll talk about what you do with excess working capital or what you can use it for a little bit later on. Well, let's compare this balance sheet to the last one. Now, in this balance sheet, current assets total $1,820,000. Current liabilities are $1,425,000, and working capital is $395,000, or a working capital ratio of 1.28 to 1. So as you can see, this company is got positive working capital, but probably not enough to make sure that it remains healthy and moving forward. So this next slide, we're going to talk about the why it matters to you. So let's start with taking a look at the first slide, and as a seller and a buyer, why it matters. So why it matters. So in this slide, you can take a look at what we've done when we position a business for sale as far as a recast on the balance sheet. Now, what we've done here is take $1 million in cash off of the balance sheet to bring the working capital ratio down into the adequate range. So what this means to the seller is that as part of his sale, his or her sale, we would be taking $1 million in addition to the sales price as net equity to them. This recast number does leave a buyer with adequate working capital for the company. So as part of that calculation that we do upfront in evaluation and or positioning the company to sell in an offering memorandum, it's really important that we take a look at the working capital components to make sure that, one, it has enough working capital, and if it does, if it has excess, removing it from the balance sheet, or at least positioning it in the offering memorandum to do that. Let's take a look at the next slide, because this is the opposite of this slide. So let's take a look at that second balance sheet where the company was actually short on working capital. So again, this is why it matters to both buyers and sellers. In this example, when we recast the balance sheet to bring the working capital component up to an acceptable level, we've had to add $600,000 in cash to the balance sheet. Now, for a seller, this will probably reduce your sales price, and for a buyer, if they buy it unknowingly with not enough working capital, they will at some point have to put additional capital onto the balance sheet. So for a seller, it's really important to know what your working capital is and have an adequate amount when it comes time to sell and run your company as well. But for a buyer, if you don't run these calculations, you may buy a company that is short on working capital, and the price that you pay for that company will actually be that price plus the additional working capital that you'll have to inject for the company to be healthy and grow in the future. Well, now you know how to calculate working capital, where to find it, what it means, and why it's important to you as a buyer or seller to understand this concept. If you have additional questions, please give Bill or I either a call or drop us an email, and we'd be more than happy to spend a few minutes with you and your balance sheet taking a look at working capital. So I hope this video helped and you found it informational, and we'll see you on the next one.